Well, it is the second night where we giveth and we taketh away. Welcome into the Hubcast studios. I am Rob Fay, and welcome to the Vancouver Canucks post-game show. And boy, I'll tell you what, when Elias Pettersson gets his second goal, you think 3-3, we're back in business, and it was an absolute howitzer. But less than a minute into the extra frame, once again, when Vancouver gets to the extra couple of minutes, it was Johnny Gaudreau the other night. Pierre-Luc Dubois does the Canucks in this one. So I'm Rob Fay. Welcome to a show that I thought was going to have some positive connotations to it. But again, it's another point earned if you want to be the glass half full guy, and a point lost if you're the glass half empty guy. We've got a lot of people that are going to break down this game. Jon Abbott, the former Vancouver Canuck play-by-play guy, is going to be in studio in just a couple of minutes' time. We will call him up. We'll bring him in. And then we've got Connor Haley from TSN 1260, who will talk about the upcoming games against the Edmonton Oilers. So before we get to that, don't forget, there's a number of ways that you can interact with this show. You can go on Twitch. You can find us on YouTube. Our Facebook Live group is open and active right now. A lot of different ways that you can interact with this show. And all we want to say is thank you. More than 2,000 subscribers through our first week of this show. That's in addition to everybody who's just looking and checking it out and seeing if this is going to be their destination for post-game coverage. And judging by the feedback we've gotten this week, we are on the right track. So, what do you think, Vancouver? Is it one of those glass half empty nights? Is it one of those glass half full nights? We'll have to see with a guy that has seen many a hockey game. He's a guy that I worked with at TSN 1040 for a number of years. A great voice and great hockey analysis as we bring in Jon Abbott into the Hubcast studios. And Jon, first and foremost, I appreciate you doing this. And let's talk a little bit about this game in particular, because again, right out of the gates, you look at the positives. Elias Pettersson with his first multi-goal game of the season. Hard to believe it took this long into the year to get there, but then right out of the chutes in overtime, less than a minute in, Pierre-Luc Dubois breaks the heart of many a Canuck fan. Size up the game for me, Abs.
Well, Rob, awesome to join you tonight, and I love the new venture as well. So I'm a huge fan of yours, you know that, and happy to be on the program. I'd say, yeah, there certainly are two ways to look at this. When you think of the Vancouver Canucks needing the points, I think it's a shame that they didn't get the regulation win, because it seemed like on a night they opened the scoring, and they desperately needed that. They get some depth scoring, a bit of a lucky one from Brandon Sutter getting the right type of bounce, but they probably were due for that after a night they got shut out. You have the highlight reel goal. We haven't seen many of those from EP40 this year, and you got the tweener between the legs to add a little bit of insurance early. And then you think against the very stingy, difficult Winnipeg Jets that you're in the driver's seat perhaps to lock this one up and take advantage of the points, and you can't do so. So, yeah, you get the game to overtime. You do get a point out of it. That's great to keep things moving forward, I suppose. But when you think of the standings as they exist now, Rob, and you see the Winnipeg Jets in that spot the Vancouver Canucks hope to be in, that's in the playoffs, they had a real chance to narrow it down to just 2 points between them and the Jets, and they couldn't do so again tonight.
You know, the thing that I just keep looking in on is games in hand. I mean, you look at 3, 4, 5 games that these teams of the North still have to play, whereas Vancouver right now is going to have to kind of sit in their messy room and wait to see what the other brothers and sisters are doing. I want to get to the lotto line because much maligned tonight. The high is what we saw from Elias Pettersson. But once again, JT Miller plays the role of the Riddler. You just don't know what you're going to get from him. Flashes of brilliance, moments of mediocrity. Let's start with Pettersson, and then let's finish with Miller. Your thoughts on EP40? Is he starting to warm up? And Miller, what can they do to get him warmed up?
Well, Rob, first of all, I'd say another positive for the Vancouver Canucks is right away, when you start the game heads up and you see Pettersson against Scheifele, I think that's the way it should be. Obviously, the Canucks playing at home have the option maybe to dictate a little bit more of those matchups. And I wondered if you'd see more of the Horvat line going that way. But I like the fact that not only was the Pettersson line playing against the Scheifele line, but they made an impact early. And what a goal from Elias Pettersson. You know, we're used to seeing so many of those highlight reel goals from him through the course of his career. And, you know, maybe this is a sign he's heating up at the right time. You know, maybe he is back, Rob, and that lotto line did look, you know, like they were going to dominate offensively in spurts, and especially Pettersson with another post. I think that's 9 on the season. Took the mask right off of Hellebuck as well. and then gets it done late, at least to inch the game to overtime and have a chance to try and win it. And they did set up the team's leading goal scorer in Brock Besser with a pretty good look in the first shift of OT too. So I'd say, yeah, positives aplenty for Pettersson. Besser, probably you'd like to narrow in on that overtime chance, but that's the way OT goes. But for JT Miller, the swing effect in his own zone just seems certainly catching up to him this season. For the honeymoon that was a year ago, erasing any kind of bad thoughts for Canucks fans of giving up a first-round pick, I'm not saying we're back there, but I don't think we expected to see so many minuses attached to JT Miller and really that line tonight. And that is the tale of the tape. Is on one hand, they seem to be poised to change the game for Vancouver, and on the other, boy, they were on the wrong side of the puck a couple of times tonight.
Before we get to Zach McEwen, because I thought that first 5 minutes of the game for Vancouver was one of the best 5 minutes I've seen all season, top to bottom. But I just want to circle back on Miller one more time, and not to kick the horse when it's down, so to speak, but it's got to be a half dozen times, just off the top of my head, Abs, where I sit there and I'm like, why isn't he moving his feet? So I guess just from a guy that's watched a lot of NHL games, is that a telltale sign to maybe something that I'm missing? Is there an injury? Is it just a mental thing where he's just giving up on plays? How would you look at that?
Yeah, great question, because we know that Miller's such a gamer. He does play through things, and we saw that in last year's bubble playoffs. We know that he is one of the all-time competitors, and you can judge that by some of his post-game reactions when it hasn't gone the Canucks' way this season as well. So I'd say maybe there's a possibility that he is grinding out through something, but you'd think it would be minor at this point, because the Vancouver Canucks, I'm sure, would not risk him potentially long-term in any chance they have at climbing up in the standings if he was trying to play through something serious. So I won't discount that thought or that theory, but I'd have to say I'm just surprised at where his game is at on the Canucks side of center. You talk about not moving his feet. How about just competing? And I mentioned it in one breath with normally that's a constant in his game. He got out-battled behind the net, and that's on the goal that allowed the Jets to try and creep back in this hockey game. I thought it was a pretty soft play by him. And I know the back of the net is not normally where he is occupying. That's usually saved for the defenseman. So he was coming down there to help, as he should. But, yeah, I thought it was a bit of a weak play. So I have been surprised at the Jekyll and Hyde of JT Miller. And when the team seems to be so easily derailed, when your top guys seem like they're having a tough time getting everything in unison and finding cohesion, boy, something like that can just send it right off real quick.
All right, so let's get back to the beginning of the game, because Zach McEwen, for me, is a guy that I use as a measuring stick for other players like Jake Virtanen. And I know that I don't even have to look at my social media feed, and I know what it already says when it comes to this topic. But when you look at the pep that it put in the Canucks step in the first 10, 15 minutes of that game, Travis Green's obviously going to like what he sees. Does Zach McEwen play his way into more playing time by simply dropping the gloves? Can it be that simple sometimes?
I think so. I do. And I think especially for this head coach, you think back again to the bubble, and it seems like 2 years ago now, but Michael Furlan came back and dropped the gloves right away and was praised for it. And I know that is Michael Furlan's calling card. If he's leaving an impact in a hockey game, maybe it does have to be that way, or so he thinks. Should he really be dropping the gloves? I'm a guy that believes not. And is there another way to play physically and set the tone for a guy like Michael Furlan? Yes. But Travis Green loved it then. He's going to love it now. And in this occasion, I like the fact that, hey, if it's going to be done, this is one of the oldest unwritten rules in the NHL book, isn't it, Rob? That it's kind of that payback, if you want to call it, but choreographed payback. So Forbart knew it was coming. McEwen hit him with a couple of good shots. It was somewhat considered entertaining to watch, and I did think it did give the team a lift. I know that's a stereotypical analysis here, but I do think it did give them a lift, and it was sticking up for one of their rookies in Höglander, obviously. So I think it did carry over. I think it helped set the tone for the Canucks. They're looking for anything to get them into a positive mindset and kind of provide some energy, especially at this time of the season against a team that you just got blanked by, and McEwen helped in that. So all in all, I think it was a very good start to the hockey game, maybe one of the best they've had this year. McEwen was a big part of that, and I think on the other side, Rob, to me, the Jets are one of those teams, when you look at their 1, 2, 3, their top 9, that's a pretty envious group. And the Vancouver Canucks are still striving to fill out their roster to compete against those types of players. But when you think of Lowry, Kopp, and Appleton, used to be Tanev, maybe that's a spot that McEwen can eventually put his name on.
Yeah, it's just every break that the Canucks got a year ago to put them in the position to go to the postseason, they have not found any of those, or very rarely. Jon Abbott joining me here on The Nation. I appreciate you doing this, Jon. Let's talk about the series, I like to call them. And basically what that means is very rarely in a regular season, 82 games, do you get to see the same team back-to-back. Sometimes we've seen teams 3 times in a row. Now that you're about 22 games in, what do you make of the fact that these two teams get to see each other more often than once? Is that a benefit? Is that something that, for example, if I'm Winnipeg, I look at, hey, this is a team that we just played a couple of nights ago. We shut them out, and here's why. We were able to pressure them. I felt like the Jets were a different team in the third, and that's not necessarily saying that the Canucks wilted. It's the fact that the Jets elevated. How much do you put merit into the fact that these teams now have, just a fresh memory into what they might be able to do to apply pressure and, dare we say, steal some points?
I think it plays a huge role overall in this, strange NHL season, condensed NHL season, and certainly when you look within each respective division and the matchups in this North Division that Vancouver is going to get. And I believe you're right in that sense, because I think the game plan against Vancouver's top line is probably going to be different on a game-to-game basis when you consider how much time teams have to prep for Pettersson, Miller, and Besser. They have a big challenge to try and fight through that, especially when they're on the road. Then, of course, it's relatively left up to the Horvat line to try and support them. You get the odd night, like you did tonight, where Brandon Sutter cashes in, and it seems like some of the depth is going to come to fruition to lead the Vancouver Canucks to picking up points in regulation. But more often than not, I think they're a team that right now others can game plan against, and their depth loses out against most of the other teams in this North Division, to be quite frank. So if you're a team coming in to face the Vancouver Canucks and you're confident you can roll 3, maybe 4 lines that have an impact, and you have a good chance at winning the hockey game if you can shut down 1 of 2 Vancouver Canucks lines that usually are left to do the bulk of the scoring, then you have a really good chance in the hockey game. Then you get the power play. Even though Pettersson proved tonight when he's on, it's tough to stop even if you can game plan for him. But yeah, I think that's adding to the Canucks' struggles this year, Rob, absolutely, is the fact that teams have lots of time to figure out Vancouver and lots of time to game plan against their biggest offensive weapons, which is really in their top 2 lines.
I used the word predictability the other night, and a couple of people blew back at me and they said, you know what, they're not creative enough. And those are 2 words that you don't want associated with you. But Ab, somebody else brought this up to me and they say, Rob, you're too tough on them. They're still young. And you talk about certain organizations, and I'm going to use Toronto as an example, where every once in a while they'll go out and they'll get a veteran, that cagey vet that you wonder why they brought him in on a minimum deal, or just something that because everybody says, oh, the days of the room and the days of mentorship have fallen by the wayside. You just got to be younger, quicker, faster. And I look at this team right now, and a lot of times I feel like they're still 20 games in, 22 games in, looking for their identity. And I just wonder if maybe the mentorship didn't walk out the door. And I'm not going to get into free agency and what left and what's still here, but would it serve a team like Vancouver well to eventually, even if it's next year, start to look for some of that mentorship that maybe they thought they had but don't have?
Perhaps. I mean, I thought they did a lot of things better tonight, the Vancouver Canucks, as a group, especially if you're looking at their forwards. I mean, all 4 lines had a chance and, created for the Vancouver Canucks. And you think of those nights as being a positive in that side of the stat sheet, and yet it doesn't add up to a win. And those nights seem to be few and far in between. And so, Rob, they've already paid for some of that veteran leadership time and time again. Jay Beagle with the Stanley Cup is supposed to be providing some of that. You think of the bottom 6, and originally that's where a lot of the money went for some of the core pieces. That franchise player in Brandon Sutter would be one of those guys as well. So I think the Canucks had dished out a lot of those dollars, expecting that some of those players, Antoine Roussel's another guy, was going to help things on and off the ice. And, without being in the room, it's hard to say exactly how effective they've been that way, but they certainly have not lived up to, more nights than not, the effectiveness on the ice. So would you love a blend of that? Yeah, maybe you do have to go out and try and find a bit of a solution there. But it's going to be tough in a flat cap era. It's going to be tough with the big boys coming due for a contract. And, maybe you get a guy like a Thornton that is certainly time-lapsed, but still really a threat, depending if he's lower in your lineup. However, you need to be a place players want to play, and you have to give that player opportunity. So is Vancouver a place that a free agent that can pick, maybe other teams is going to want to choose if he's going to play lower in the lineup? I'd say right now, probably not. So I think there's plenty of challenges ahead for Vancouver that way. And I don't know that one veteran guy is really going to provide a solution at this point.
Abs, two more for you quickly. I know you've broadcast both for the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Vancouver Canucks, and I know how hard it must have been. I think you did this at the World Juniors, not this year, but year prior, where you were broadcasting through the television as opposed to being in the city and dealing with those variables. From a fan's perspective and a player's perspective, what do you think they're going through right now when usually you can draw energy from a crowd to maybe give you that extra push? And right now, the Vancouver Canucks just don't have that when they're at home. It's canned music. It's got to be tough for a broadcaster, but I'm wondering if it is at times tough for a player as well.
I think it has to be in certain situations, Rob. And I think to your point about the first period being, such a good one for the Vancouver Canucks, you hope that sets the table. You hope that catapults this team forward to get through the next 40 and then have, a body of work that they can be proud about, that they can move forward with. Oh, and the 2 points in your back pocket against, another team that you so badly need them against in the division in this type of year. So you hope that opening 20 leads you to good things in the second and in the third. And again, I thought the Canucks were better tonight on a whole. Obviously, the third period let them down a little bit until Pettersson saved them right at the end. But I think right now, with the exception of tonight, there are too many times this season you can see the frustration sinking into the Vancouver Canucks. And, that is a little bit of a different shade than in years past, and certainly directly from last year, where there weren't many of those nights and there weren't many of those players that let it show. And I realize that's because they're all competitors, but you can sense that sometimes this season seems to be getting to them already at this point. So, man, the grind is only going to be getting tougher. I know you're going to tee up the Oilers series coming up after me, and there's a team that found a way to climb back up in the standings. A little bit of a different roster makeup, but again, these points being so valuable no matter what team comes into town. And if Vancouver Canucks can't find a way to get this together for more than just one win at a time here and there, I think that frustration is going to sink in, and it might just be a sinking feeling by the time the year's done.
All right, Abs, before I let you go, I got to let you know our social media feeds right now across the board are like, oh, that's what Jon Abbott looks like. I've brought a couple of radio guys on it. To be honest with you, they even said about J-Pat. They're like, oh, I didn't realize. So I know it's been a couple of weeks since the TSN dissolve happened, but this is a chance for you and I to connect. And I know that you had a lot of support during your times at TSN. Maybe one of your favorite memories, and then we'll wrap up. Your thoughts just on your journey in this Vancouver market over the last couple of years.
Oh, man, this is such a heavy one to hit me with on the last question when we're timing out, because being a radio guy and a talker and a friend of yours, I could go on for a long time here. By the way, this is not a Mike Gillis appearance. This is just the home appearance, and I'll get to it in a couple of days. But
I love it.
I don't know. It was a family, wasn't it, Rob? Maybe that's the best way I can put it. Is that we just so loved not only our job each and every day. We so loved the city and the people we were speaking to across the province, but we loved the people we worked with. And I think that's probably still the biggest thing for me, is that we don't get to see each other every day, or the times that we'd run into each other at work. And so that's probably the most difficult thing, is knowing that group is not going to be back collectively together again, although things like this really, make my week, make my month, insert title here. And one of the best memories, what I'd say from a professional standpoint, Henrik Sedin, 1,000 points. That's just never going to leave me, being in the house and calling that one. And from a personal standpoint, just making a home in Vancouver and having 3 children born here and just feeling, at one with the community. So I'm very thankful for having the opportunity to get in the door here. And despite the way it ended, very thankful for being here.
Well, Abs, I just want to say you're the only guy I've ever met that has never had a bad day. And the fact that I reached out to you on a Sunday, this is always kind of the short straw of the work week when you ask somebody to do something late on a Sunday. You didn't blink, you're here tonight. And I just wanted to say I miss you, and I thank you for doing this tonight, Abs.
My schedule has plenty of days open, so feel free to call back again. And at any time. I miss you, Rob. I miss having the chance to connect with you, as I said, and this was awesome. I love where you're going. I wish you nothing but success, buddy.
Thank you. There he is, Jon Abbott, again, longtime broadcaster, both with the Toronto Maple Leafs and, of course, the Vancouver Canucks. All right, well, we got to stop looking backwards at some point. Now we're going to look forwards. On the other side, Connor Haley of TSN 1260 will join us, and we will talk about the Edmonton Oilers, who I don't know if you know this, but are one of the hottest teams of the NHL right now. I don't know if that's a good news situation for Vancouver or a bad news situation, but we'll get into it with somebody on the other side of the mountains as to what the Vancouver Canucks, have coming up over the next 72 hours. I am Rob Fay. We will be back in a couple of moments with the out-of-town scoreboard, Connor Haley, and much more. You're watching The Nation. All right, guys, welcome back to The Nation. I am Rob Fay. What a thrill to have you along. And we will get to the out-of-town scoreboard in a moment's time, which is sponsored by one of our newer sponsors, a gentleman by the name of Savvy Singh, who's in real estate. And the reason that I wanted to come back cold here, as opposed to going straight to the out-of-town scoreboard, is when it comes to sponsorship, obviously we play the 30-second commercials and we get to know the graphics behind me and all these kind of things. I want to let you know about this guy. And this is one of the things that I enjoy about doing community outreach here, is the fact that we're not big corporate. We are definitely small business. And Savvy's a guy, listen, I could sit here and talk about being a realtor and all the stuff that he's done in the community. Here is a guy, and he's going to be embarrassed that I said this, but here's a guy that when he found out that things were struggling with TSN 1040 and that a lot of us were on the ropes, he knew that I was going to barbering school downtown, and I'm halfway through my program. Sight unseen, this guy offered to pay a month of my tuition just to make sure that I could get through one of the toughest months that I've been through in a long time. I got to tell you this right now. That's the kind of guy that I will always have on this show. So I'm just saying, if you ever got a house or you got an apartment or you got a need, that's the kind of guy that you should do business with, because he took care of me. He will take care of you. Simply one call does it all. Savvy Singh Real Estate Consulting. Again, no project too big, no project too small. But I think more than anything, I back that guy. Savvy Singh has been a fantastic guy in our community, and I can say to have somebody in one of my lowest moments come up to me and say, hey man, I got your tuition for this month. What else can you say? All right, let's talk about it. Let's go to the out-of-town scoreboard. Just one other Canadian game in action tonight. I know, I'm the same guy. I can't believe it. Ottawa comes from behind, beats Montreal. Montreal late scores to tie it. And then in the extra period, Ottawa gets both those points. So I know they're back of the other 6 teams in the North Division, but you sit around and 2 things pop to me. One, Ottawa is fighting, man. They're not the best team, but they're scratching and clawing. Montreal, by the way, has now lost 4 of their past 5 and are starting to fall back into the conversation in the North Division. So it's Toronto, there's about 3 teams, which includes Edmonton and Montreal, and now Winnipeg. And then you got the teams that are spinning their tires in the mud, which includes Calgary, Vancouver, and a hard-fought 2 points for Ottawa just a couple hours ago. All right, speaking of Edmonton, this is a team that a couple of weeks ago was looking at each other wondering what the heck is going on here. They've got 2 of the best players in the entire league and just couldn't get it done. They've now won 3 in a row. I don't know if you've been looking at the newspapers or online, but Connor McDavid is in a different stratosphere right now. Him and Austin Matthews, really a 1-2 punch right now for the Hart. And we will bring in a guy that I think has a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's going on at Edmonton from TSN 1260, Connor Haley. Connor, I got to be honest with you. The fact that you're doing this at this hour, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So first and foremost, thank you for being here. And what's in the water in Edmonton over the last 72 hours? Is it simply Connor McDavid, or are you starting to notice that the team as a whole are making those changes?
Well, first off, Rob, thanks a lot for having me here. And I actually worked on our evening show for about 3 years, so I'm used to the late nights here. So I don't mind it. Definitely a pleasure to hop on with you. And just for the Oilers, yeah, I mean, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl typically get all the headlines. But one thing that I've noticed in the last 11 games here with their hot play, it's been the secondary scoring. We've seen players that don't usually contribute to a certain level start to do so, and getting it from the back end as well. Tyson Barrie started to play a lot better. Darnell Nurse has been one of the better players for the Edmonton Oilers. They're getting contributions from Judar Kara and Tyler Ennis, guys that were waived and put on the practice roster. So for sure, Connor McDavid, he's going to do those types of things that you saw last night against the Calgary Flames, putting up the 5 points and then kind of taking the third period off. But I would say the biggest reason is just getting that secondary scoring. You also have to factor in that Mike Smith came back, and Mikko Koskinen, God love him, he did all that he could, but I think the fatigue was just wearing on him. So getting Mike Smith back to take some of the reps away, take a little bit of that pressure off, I think that's gone a long way for this club. And just the overall commitment to team defense has really improved in the last couple of weeks here.
You talk about Mikko Koskinen and, of course, Mike Smith. Smith was one of those guys where you weren't really sure if he was coming or going. He's obviously solidified that so far this season. What is the change? Because I think there was a camp there that thought, boy, Mike Smith's never going to get over here in Edmonton. Is it the fact that they've been a little more selective with their schedule, or is it the fact that he doesn't maybe feel the pressure that he felt a season ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think a combination of those things. I thought last year Dave Tippett did a pretty good job of kind of playing the hot hand. And one thing I've always thought about Mike Smith is that this guy can go on runs and he can be one of the best goalies in the league. But at the same time, there's still that chance that he goes on a real cold streak. And last year, Dave Tippett, I thought, did a very good job of finding those moments, kind of keying in on it. And then that's when he'd get Mikko Koskinen in there and let him run with it for a couple games. So I think a lot of it's just Mike Smith kind of knowing himself and knowing how many games, how many situations in a row he can be put out there for. But honestly, I think it's just kind of getting that balance, having 2 starting goalies. I know if you ask fans in Edmonton, it's kind of a conversation, and now it's kind of split. Are you team Mikko? Are you team Mike Smith? And when you make it into that playoff run, if they can do so, you kind of need one guy to really grab it by the horns and run with it. And in the last 2 years with what we've seen, neither goalie has really been able to do that. It's kind of back and forth. So for Mike Smith this year, I mean, I think it's early. That's the big thing. Obviously, he had the injury and he didn't play for the Oilers for the first few games of the season, first couple of weeks. And right now you're seeing a guy who's refreshed. He did have that bad game again where he was pulled out, and Dave Tippett gave him a chance the next game to kind of redeem himself, and he did do that. But I think if you ask kind of any Oiler fan out there, it's hit and miss still for Mike Smith. We're not too sure how long he can keep this going, but right now it looks good.
Connor Haley at TSN 1260 joining us here in Vancouver. I appreciate you doing this. Of course, Canucks getting ready to take on the Oil for a couple of games. A couple of different players I want to throw at you because I just want our fan base here in Vancouver to see what we're about to get on the other side of the mountains. Let's talk a little bit about Jesse Puljujarvi, because there's a guy, we've had this situation with Olli Juolevi here where we see the high expectations, and it was a little later to the party for him. But when you look at Jesse and the fact that he's still so young and is finally starting starting to get a little traction in Edmonton. Is the sky still the limit for him, or is Edmonton still a little jaded by his slow progression and still waiting to see maybe a little more body of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think Edmonton still, still waiting to see what he can become. And right from the beginning, I remember working the draft show when Pierre-Luc Dubois was selected 3rd overall, and our studio kind of freaked out, like, holy cow, Jesse Puljujarvi is going to fall to the Oilers at 4. Nobody really saw it coming. And I think both sides kind of bungled that situation from the beginning. Management brought him over a little too quick, and the language barrier did play a role there. And, he just didn't look comfortable. There was spurts where he looked good, but on and off the ice, I just don't think he was totally comfortable. Going back to Finland, I think, was a good move for him. He started to get a little more comfortable, mature, obviously, grow into his body, and that helped him out quite a bit. And when he came back, he was just a different player. I can tell you there was media members watching him in that short little training camp that they had, and it was like, this guy is totally different. I mean, he's the biggest body out there. He moves around. He's starting to see things just a little bit better. He's communicating with these guys, and I think right now, obviously, the sky is the limit. Anytime you get a chance to play with a player like Connor McDavid and be on his wing alongside with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, you're going to get your opportunities. And the first few games were a little slow, but he's starting to find that scoring touch. So, yeah, there's a lot of optimism about Jesse Puljujarvi. And he actually spoke to the media here a couple of days ago and talked about how, he has a girlfriend he's living with now. They've got a dog. He seems like he's just matured like anyone would. The situation he came into a few years ago was tough, and I don't think too many guys can succeed. But, credit to Ken Holland and the Oilers management staff for rebuilding that relationship. There was a time where he wanted out of the organization, and I thought they did a really good job to be calm, don't force the hand, don't force the move, and it's paying off now.
I was reading Jim Matheson's column in The Sun the other day, and he was talking about the workload of Darnell Nurse. Now, of course, I'd like to say that the book's already out that he's a workhorse, but I think it was something like 69 minutes in the last 2 games. I mean, that for anybody is extraordinary. Can you talk about how much he's been able to solidify this team with those gaudy moments? And will they ever start to pull those back, or are they just going to ride him until he passes out?
That's a good question. I know he's talked about it and says that he likes those minutes. I've talked to your producer before here. I was on the treadmill for about 10 minutes when we were in our conversation. I was dying, so I don't know how he does it, but I guess that's why he's paid the big bucks to do so. And last night, Slater Cuckoo broke his collarbone. He'll be done for the rest of the season. So somebody kind of had to step up and play the minutes. And Darnell Nurse has proven that he can do so. Right now, I think he's 6th in the league in minutes, or at least going into tonight's games. And, it's probably a little early, but there's a lot of hype around him right now. And Oilers fans have questioned him for a long time. Can he step up, fix things in his defensive zone? But with Oscar Klefbom being out for the season, he's one of the guys who's really improved his game the most on the back end. And, I mean, it's early, like I said, but people have been throwing out the Norris. He's tied for the league in defensive goals scored. He's 2nd in points, his plus minus, which some people think is an overrated statistic. He's 3rd in the league. So he's really just found a way to bring it all together. And there was a point in the season a couple weeks ago where, whatever he was doing was working out. Throwing it on net, it would be a garbage goal, but it would find its way in. It'd be deflected. It'd bounce to somebody. He'd pick up a helper that way. So I think going back to your original question, I think it's probably going to be what they've been doing. Just continue to ride him as much as they can. And if the play starts to get worse, then maybe that's when they slow the minutes down a bit.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I just want you to remember where you're broadcasting into. To a guy that broadcasts on the other side of the mountains, size up Vancouver from your perspective. We all have just dragged this team high and low through the mud for the last couple of weeks, but from a guy that's maybe looking at this from 10,000 feet away, size up Vancouver in your estimation.
Oh man, I don't want all the viewers to rip me. I get the hate mail on Twitter or anything. I really like Vancouver. I think Pettersson and Besser. I mean, there's some great talent there. Olio Levy, a guy you mentioned, that's someone I was so high on. I really hope that he'd make it over to the NHL and start to play, because I thought he was going to be a really good prospect. But I'm a little worried about the goaltending. Markstrom was a big loss, obviously. Crazy what Toffoli's doing out in Montreal. I still think that the Canucks can be a playoff team or should be a playoff team, though. I think Montreal, Toronto probably the top two spots, but I see no reason why the Canucks can't slide into that third or fourth spot in the playoffs. I do like them, and I think they've got a lot of fun young players to watch. So it's a team that I do enjoy watching, and I will say the first time these two teams met up, I was really surprised actually because, like I said, some good young talent there. Just I think maturation will come along, and they're all going to get better. But I do like the Canucks team.
Well said. Connor, I appreciate you doing this, especially at that late hour. And I got to say, man, big ups on the hat. I notice if you're down a little bit, it's a Blue Jay hat, and it's the old school one from the 93 days. So I respect the game on that one. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I remember the good old days, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, some of us more than others. You're just a young buck. You probably have to read it in the book. But I just want to say, Connor, thank you for doing this, especially at the hour. I know the time difference and the fact that you did this live. You're a good man. I appreciate you doing this. Thank you. And we'll do this again, hopefully.
Oh, anytime, Rob. I really appreciate the offer. And just congratulations on it. It looks awesome. I'm a big fan of the show.
Thank you very much. Connor Haley from TSN in Edmonton. All right, let's really quickly get you set up for the final segment of the show. If you have some conversation and you're saying to yourself, all right, Rob, you know what? I appreciate that you're wearing the suit jacket instead of the jersey, but it's time to get back to the old Rob Fay Nation days. The answer will be coming on Tuesday, our next show. So get a load of this. We, instead of just dialing us up on the old phone, are going to have an opportunity for you to Zoom right onto the show. Now, I know some of you guys don't like being on camera at this hour, but you have the opportunity to interact with the show. We'll put you in the green room, then we will just pick you and you'll come on one after the other. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, Rob, this is great and fancy, but why aren't you wearing a jersey? And why can't we call you? Why can't we access you? It's layers. You got to remember, this is the first week of the nation, and what we've been able to accomplish with the guests and just all the interaction has been fantastic. But I don't want you to think that I forgot about you. So interaction is on the way just hours from now. But more than anything, don't forget, we'd love for you to subscribe. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversation online. I know that there's a lot of people scrolling through, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook Live or Twitch, wherever you're watching tonight. But more than anything, support these sponsors, subscribe, like, and let's share the word on what we're doing here, because this is you and I. We're doing this together. And more than anything, I promise you, next week, I've got two fantastic announcements that I wish I could tell you tonight, but I promise if you stick around, maybe even on social media tomorrow, we're going to drop some things on you that I think will have you coming back on the regular. All right, we'll take our break here. When we come back, I will give you my thoughts on the Vancouver Canucks right now, and we will also talk about the Seattle Mariners, who have a president that right now is in some pretty hot water. If you're a Mariners fan, you may want to plug your ears. I'm Rob Fay, and this is The Nation. Dude, I feel like I need my glow sticks every time I watch that. I'm Rob Fay. Welcome back to The Nation. And if you're wondering if we're going to have Travis Green, we will just moments from now. We will also have words from Braden Holtby, who, of course, was in net for tonight's 4-3 loss for the Vancouver Canucks. But if I could just share a moment with you on the Vancouver Canucks, because I know that you've expected me when it was the radio platform, whenever they lost, you always like, oh, Rob's going to come in hot on these guys. And I'll just tell you this. I have long been of the adage, you cannot get into the postseason in your first 25 games, but you can sure knock yourself out of the postseason in the first 25 games. And I look right now at where Vancouver is. It's a 4-3 loss. Yes, I know if you want to take the glass half full, to use that adage again, they got a point out of this. But this is a home game against a team that they had just played, so they should have known what was coming their way. They had a 2-goal lead again and just can't seal the deal. So the question that I have for you tonight, because I think I have a pretty good answer, but I'd love to hear from you on our social media channels. When you continuously build up leads and then you can't hold on to leads, what do you think the problem is? Because for me right now, it is the inability to elevate. This is a game of adaptation. This is a game of constantly changing, and it even happens in between shifts. It happens between periods. And you know what the problem is with this Vancouver team is they never change what they are. And if you look at the game against Calgary where they had a lead and then blew it, if you look at tonight's game where they had a lead and they just blew it, I know you're sitting back saying, well, wait a second, Elias Pettersson's getting hot. Hey, that's fine and dandy. But your third line, your fourth line, which are the John Cena of the North Division, where are they? Can't see them. I sit there and I know what you're saying. Brandon Sutter's got a handful of goals. Let's sign him up. I'm telling you this. You can sit here and talk about the goals and the assists and who's getting theirs and who's not. I'm looking at one category right now, points within their division. And for me right now, if you are predictable as a team, as an organization, forget it. You might as well start your summer early, come back next year and try your luck again. Because there is nothing more challenging for a team when the team that they're playing always has different looks and different lines and different matchups and ways where they're like, oh my God, this team has the last change and I didn't see that coming. It's so predictable. Like, am I wrong to say that? Like, I know that I shouldn't be here with my little fancy jacket on talking about how the Canucks aren't a good team. They are a good team. And I think that's the thing for me that's frustrating. If this team sucked, if this was Ottawa, then I'd be totally fine with it. But this is a team that's got Besser, Hughes, Horvat, Pettersson, Miller. We should not be in this situation right now. So you can sit here and challenge them to be better, but I want them to be creative. I want Travis Green to be more creative. We've seen the Lotto line, but maybe we need to shake it up. We need to see Bo Horvat in different situations. We can't simply sit around and look at Nils Höglander as, boy, it's cool that we got a great 20-year-old again. You have to look outside the box. You got to be creative. The power play is predictable. The penalty kill is predictable. You just knew when this game got to overtime, because we had seen this story before, that was probably going to be the likable outcome. Again, think of Johnny Gaudreau's goal. How fast did that come in that game against Calgary? It was what, the first minute? Pierre-Luc Dubois, first minute again. You know why? Because predictability and just inability always wins the day. And I think right now for Vancouver, they have probably played themselves into a team that's going to have to play 650 hockey somewhere in there to truly find their way into the postseason. That is something that I don't think anybody in the North Division thought was coming their way this early in the season. So crack the whip, might as well. But so long as you trot out the same game plan, you're going to get the same results. And that's just one guy's opinion. All right, let's get it from the horse's mouth, all right? I could sit here and wax on poetically all I want, but we have the opportunity now to go back to Rogers Arena and catch up with the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks coming off a 4-3 overtime loss. Here is Travis Green.
Travis, Braden was in here just now, and he talked about the second goal in particular as something you need your goaltender to save if you want to have success. Just your thoughts on the overall goaltending performance, especially in the third period and overtime.
There's, if he says there's a goal or two that he'd like to have back, then, I'll leave it at that.
Overall, you went through this against Calgary as well, where you had the lead, a 2-goal lead, wind up getting it back into overtime and then not getting that extra point. We've said this a lot in these last 7 games. So much has been going well, but how tough is it to go through that again?
Yeah, I think tonight's game was, when you get to overtime and you're playing 3-on-3, especially the way the game went, this was an emotional loss, I think, for our group. We did a lot of good things tonight. That's a good hockey team over there. I think we've got them for around 10, 11 scoring chances, which is probably one of our lowest against all year. And they're good. We did a lot of good things, a lot of things I loved in our game. Made a couple of mistakes that you'd probably like to have back. But, that happens in every hockey game. You never watch a game tape for either team where you don't have a couple little things that you don't like or you'd like to have back. And, it's not going for our team right now, the way they're playing. And, but that's reality. And we've got to be honest with our game, honest with our team. We've also got another game coming up soon. So we got to reset and get ready for that game.
Next up is Brendan Batchelor.
Hey, Travis, you take 3 minor penalties as a group in the third period, all stick penalties from forwards. And, we've talked about it in the past. You're the most penalized team in the league to this point. How frustrating is it, especially in a close game where you give them a chance to grab the momentum with some of those penalties?
Probably should have been 2. We should have had a 5-on-3 on the last call. The ref knows he made a mistake on that one, and it comes back to our end. But I'm not going to blame it on the penalties tonight. I don't like that we took through 3, but I'm not going to blame them coming back on the penalties.
And Elias scores on a one-timer from that spot.
Right, guys, well, that's the conference. The one takeaway, there was one sentence in there. And again, I'm not here to beat up on Travis Green. He's an NHL coach. I'm just a guy sitting 35 minutes away from the arena. But he says it's not going our way the way that we're playing. You think? This is the problem. It doesn't get any easier. Let's see what's coming up for the Vancouver Canucks here over the next couple of games, because you're getting ready to take on a team in the Edmonton Oilers that are red hot right now. They've won 3 in a row. The top guys, the Dreisaitl's of the world, the McDavids of the world, they are playing with purpose. Darnell Nurse, as we just heard from Connor Haley of TSN 1260s, logging monster moments. They have a team that is starting to find their identity and starting to find their way. So here's what's coming up this week. They've got 2 with the Edmonton Oilers, and then look how you start the month of March. It's Winnipeg again. And this right here, this 3-game pocket for me is the season for the Vancouver Canucks. I know what you're thinking. Rob, we're not even at the midway point of the season. If they don't grab these next 3 games by the neck and strangle 4 to 5 points out of them at minimum, there's just going to be too much ground to make up, because you're also giving points to Edmonton. You assume that Toronto and Montreal are going to be 2 of the teams that get in there. And if you let Edmonton pull away, then you've got to deal with either Calgary and Winnipeg. 2 teams that so far this year haven't necessarily matched up perfectly with Vancouver. Yes, I know what you're saying. They beat Calgary in that 3-game series, quote unquote, but they need more. And I think if they come out of this with 1 or 2 points, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. All right, Braden Holtby got the call tonight, and what was interesting is I thought he was actually going to play last night, and that Thatcher Demko would get tonight. Here's Braden just moments after the game.
Right, and just looking at that third goal that the Jets scored on the power play, it just looked like you lost track of the puck as it moved across the zone. What happened there? Did you not see it through a screen, or was Ben blocking your view of the puck? What happened on that play?
I saw the initial pass. I was looking on the left side of the screen, went to my right, and I couldn't see the guy that was shooting. Tried to go far right side, saw nothing, kind of shifted back a little bit to the left and shot came in. One of those that, like to do it over somehow, try and find that guy. If there's a way, one that we'll just have to look at and see what we can do different.
It's a bit of a tough one going into the third period with a lead. What can you guys take from this game that is positive that you can move forward and do better in the future?
Yeah, I thought we played a pretty good game. That's one on that the second goal. It's a weird balance to what you want, but it's when your goalie wants has to save in order to have success. So I thought we played a pretty good game. Myself, I just have to be better.
Arhan Lalji, TSN.
Braden, what about the first 2 periods? Certainly, you want to be better on those other ones late, but do you feel like you were sharp on your game early on? Does that make it even harder to see how it finished?
Yeah, I felt pretty comfortable throughout the whole game. it's it seemed like they're a pretty good rush team, and we did a pretty good job of limiting it. And like I said, it's one of those games where you feel good about a lot of things, but this game is a matter of plays, individual plays, and that's there's a couple there that I need to be better on.
Where are you in your role?
All right, there's the thoughts of Braden Holtby just minutes after the Vancouver Canucks fall in overtime by a score of 4-3. And again, it's heartbreaking. You think of the trend here between the loss with Calgary and the loss with Winnipeg. 2 late goals, one from Brock Besser the other night, one from Elias Pettersson tonight. They give this team life. It's an opportunity to finally shake the monkey off their back. And then 2 quick goals in the 3-on-3 overtime. And just like that, they watch a team walk out with an extra point. Okay, so what do you think tonight? I'd love to hear from you. Our social media is going fast and furious all across the platforms. Thank you for everything that you're saying. We're working on it. We're trying to get it better every show, but I like where we're at right now. And again, the interaction is going to be key starting Tuesday, where we bring you into our Zoom calls, which means you will get to interact with this show after a week of, again, being a little guest heavy, but we're going to make sure that you are the focus of our shows moving forward. Very quickly, want to talk a little baseball. I know that this is a hockey post-game show, but we do like to talk all sports. And 2 things very quickly from the baseball world before we call it a show. The first one has to do with Seattle Mariners president Kevin Mather, who I don't know what he was thinking. He was on a Zoom call with the Rotary Club of Bellevue. Not usually the hub for activity when it comes to news, but Bellevue Rotary is in the news in a big, big way because the president of the Seattle Mariners pretty much emptied the vault on a bunch of different topics, and none of them were well received, including the fact that he was looking to cut salary in any way that he could and thought that one of the players of Japanese descent on his team could probably do without his translator. And now that's public. And he said that if he was to cut that and made that public, that all of a sudden the, quote, English got better. That's not the only thing that came out of this conversation. It was quickly pulled down off YouTube, but too late. People had captured it, and they are off and running. I paraphrase, but you get the gist of it. One other tidbit that he brought forward that I thought was of kind of interesting value to us here in Vancouver, he said that he passed up on opportunities to go to either Spokane, Washington, or Vancouver. Which, if you're a Mariners fan and you think, boy, what an opportunity to get into this market and, dare we say, grow the Mariners brand instead of Toronto just having a lockhold on it, that's a missed opportunity. Spokane is a missed opportunity. They ended up staying with Everett, and now they're locked in with Everett, Washington, which is about 30 minutes away for the next 10 years. But it does solidify 2 things. One, that the Blue Jays weren't always in on Vancouver. Again, that's a story in the rearview mirror, but the Mariners were looking at Vancouver as a destination, which should make people at Nat Bailey feel pretty good that there were 3 different organizations that wanted to set up at Nat Bailey Stadium. If you do the math, it was Oakland, it was Toronto, and it was Seattle. But if Seattle had the opportunity to instead stay with Everett, who's just half an hour away, and every once in a while uses them as a satellite team where they can get a guy just up the I-5 and do a quick rehab game. I've seen Felix Hernandez there. Iwakuma was there. There's a couple of different guys over the years that have set up shop, and obviously they've helped the Aqua Sox. But again, having a guy who can just go rehab in a home game while the Mariners are on the road, no-brainer. But I also look at Spokane. It's one of the biggest cities in Washington State. What an opportunity to grow your brand there. You don't think Spokane would have loved to have them out at a Vista Stadium? And then Vancouver, because I have long said this. I've never understood why the Mariners haven't looked at this market more heavy than they have. Sure, they look at Portland because, again, Portland geographically is only a couple hours away. It's a pretty big city. But, dude, can you not look up here to the 2.5 million people that live in this city and say, that's a great opportunity for us to market? I mean, they bring up their caravan and they're in and out in a day, maybe a day and a half. How do you not, as a major league organization, bend metal to try and get your minor league affiliate with the Vancouver Canadians? It's crazy to me. So Toronto, to the victor goes the spoils. They're set up at Nat Bailey for the next decade, and good for them. And I think for a lot of the fan base, good for them. I know I had a tremendous relationship with the Blue Jays. But for Seattle to have your president, Kevin Mather, come out and not only just completely embarrass your organization from a PR perspective, but let that little nugget out, that's just such a missed marketing opportunity. Cool, you're hanging out in the city of Everett. 50, 55,000, and they're half hour away. But if you just drove another hour and 15 minutes, you would have had a city of 2.5 million that have started to follow your team more closely. Because trust me, we all know Stroman, Sanchez, Syndergaard, Pilar, Manoah, Klopfenstein, all the guys that have come here, Nate Pearson, we know them. We follow them all the way to Toronto and we watch them every night. You had that opportunity to cultivate your brand in this city and you passed up on it. I can't figure that out. All right, finally, everybody asks me, they say, Rob, you got to talk, I want to hear that story about Joe Carter. I noticed that we got a lot of new followers and I thought this would be a cool night to do it because I want to finish on a positive. So people have asked me, they say, Rob, what's one of the greatest appearances that you've ever seen at Nat Bailey Stadium? So I want to take you back to, I think it was 2013. The guy on the left is Joe Carter, you know, the guy from 1993, Touch 'em All Joe, Toronto Blue Jay home run that wins the World Series. Guy on the right is a guy that's holding a green bag, and inside the bag is something I will never forget because I tell you what, it was so impressive. So a local fan goes up to him and basically says, hey, Joe, I was at the game that you hit the home run. And Joe's probably heard this 100 times. But he starts showing photos from a photo book. Rich Pullman is the fan's name. And he basically says, I was sitting in front of your father, like one row in front of your father. So Rich, as he's showing this to Joe, Joe can't believe it. And Joe's father's actually now passed away. So there's Rich, the guy that was on the right, taking a selfie with one of those cameras, the disposable ones. And that's Joe Carter's dad as Joe is running around the bases. Imagine being able to get that picture. So Rich, I don't know, just the perfect shot, ended up getting a picture of Joe Carter's dad as Joe was touching them all. And Rich ended up a couple of years later, well, many years later, going back to Nat Bailey Stadium, asking me if I could introduce him to Joe. I said, you know, Joe's a pretty busy guy. He says, trust me, I got something for Joe. Once I realized what it was, seeing the reaction on Joe Carter's face is one of those moments that you can only experience once, and it was such a neat moment. And I just ended up catching up with Rich, who still runs a bar just outside of Whistler. He's got one of the best baseball/hockey memorabilia areas that you'll ever find within his restaurant. And more than anything, it's always good to check back with friends and making sure that they're doing well. So reason I bring up that story, in addition to telling you one of my great memories, is it's always cool to check in on your friends, especially during this pandemic. I mean, it has been far longer than I think many of us thought early on. And you think back to all the people that you used to hang out with, you usually think of that inner circle, but we touch a lot of different people's lives. Maybe it's an old colleague, somebody that you knew from back in the day. What's wrong with picking up the phone? I had a great, interaction back and forth with Rich. We hadn't talked baseball in a couple of years, and I just asked him at one point, I go, how you doing? And it was so cool to hear his stories and everything he's gone through over the last year. I got to tell him a little bit about what's happening in my world. And I hung up and I just thought to myself, I got to remind you to do the same. Because right now, I think we could all use just a little bit of interaction, an opportunity to check in on our friends and make sure that they're doing well as yourself. Food for thought. All right, I want to thank Jon Abbott, former, of course, Toronto Maple Leafs broadcaster, former Vancouver Canuck broadcaster, and Connor Haley of TSN 1260 for making some time for us tonight from Edmonton. We let you know what happened with the Vancouver Canucks, who again fall 4-3 in overtime to Winnipeg, and we let you know what's on the other side of the mountain as Edmonton is next up for Vancouver. They're going to come here and they're going to try and get the best of the Canucks, who again, close, but no cigar. They do pick up the point, but unfortunately they fall tonight against the Jets. My thanks to you for logging on. My thanks to you for tuning in. My thanks to Hubcast Media, everybody in the back room right now that made this show look the way that it does. I am Rob Fay. And tonight, once again, thank you for everything that you've done. More than 2,000 subscribers already in our first week. I am Rob Fay. We'll do this again on Tuesday. You've been watching The Nation. Good night, everybody.